Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffiths. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffiths, and this podcast is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts globally. And honestly, it's all because of my guests. I am honored and blessed to share time with people who are at the top of their game, and they come here willing to help you get to where you want to be in life and in business. Now, these are not people who hold back. Their goal is to share with us the essence of peak performance. And today we are joined by Kevin Spark, the acclaimed author of the psychological thriller ID, a novel. It's a fascinating book. It's scary, but it's a fascinating book. So after a career as a graphic designer in the UK, where he worked on TV show props and ad campaigns, Kevin then pursued his passion for writing during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of us went in just different areas during that. And his debut novel, which it's in front of me on my desk, has been praised for its character development, storytelling, and exploration of the human psyche. And that was influenced by his visual arts background. Now, Kevin's journey from graphic designer to novelist highlights the power of following one's passions. And he is also the owner and creative director of Onion Creative, a branding consultancy in Brisbane, Queensland, in Australia, with over 15 years of experience in brand strategies and digital marketing. So join us as we delve into his inspirations, challenges, and insights into writing. Kevin, welcome to Your Partner in Success. It's good to have you here.
Hi, Denise. Thanks so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, I looked at your book and I love the title. I love the whole title. I love the cover. It's a horror book. I'm scared. So,
It's not for the faint of heart, I think. It's actually pronounced id. Actually, I know.
I was going to ask you, was id, like the id and the I? Okay, not ID, it's id. Okay, sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah, because it's sort of structured around that Freudian theory of the id, the ego, and the superego.
Right.
So id being the sort of the primitive part of the brain, the part that governs desire and want, and the superego being the kind of moral conscience, and the ego is the one that mediates between the two. So because it's about giving into your compulsions, that's why it was called id. There you go.
And I can't believe I missed that. I looked at that and I went, well, that's interesting. It's all lowercase. I should have caught on, but I'm glad you let us know that. So before we get started, can you share a bit about your journey from working in graphic design to becoming a published author? What inspired you to pursue writing this book?
Well, I think writing is always, certainly for me, it is a natural progression from art, because even when like when I was at school, when I was a kid, I was always good at drawing. So you tend to gravitate to the things that you do well. So it seemed natural that I would end up in the creative arts, whether as a designer or painter. I actually started off in fine art, but I didn't really want to be that sort of starving artist living in a garret somewhere. So I chose graphic design so I could actually make a living. And then from that, it's, designer art is still about telling stories. And even as a kid, I always told stories. Even to the point, like I remember when I used to catch the bus to school, I'd tell my mates stories, and I'd just make stuff up. And I used to have a bit of a crowd around me, just making up the story. I was often sort of a little bit insecure about the story, so I would make it up about saying, "Oh, I saw this great film on TV last night," and then tell them the story about it. But it was just something I'd made up.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Did they ever just call you out on it and say, "Oh, you're talking full of junk there. Come on," or did they just go, "Oh, wow," or both?
they would sometimes start to say, "Well, what film is it?" and,
That's good.
and where was it on? Because back in those days, there was only four channels in England. But most of it, for the most part, they just wanted to listen to the story. And we were talking about, we were quite small kids.
You
This
know,
is
we
primary
talk a
school.
lot about storytelling on this podcast because what I do, it's audio. There's no visual here, but it's storytelling. It's connecting with people through stories, your stories, my stories. It's important.
Well, that's right, and I think collectively we all have a history of storytelling, and it is what sort of drives us. And I think when you couple sort of different interests together, I mean, I've from an advertising background as well, it's always interesting to sort of figure out, what are the triggers that get people to do things. Why do people do the things that they do? If we can sort of find a way to sort of stimulate those triggers and those choices, then you've got a successful campaign on your hands. But when you start to look at in a story context, you still have that beginning, middle, and an end. There is still a narrative that runs through it. So for me, even when you're composing, like if I was doing an art piece where you're just doing a single still, a picture, um, I was more interested in terms of because a picture is really a moment in time, unless you're doing still life. I was never really a big fan of doing a painting of a bowl of fruit. It was always something like Nighthawks at the Diner or something like where it was more filmic. It was more of a scene. Um, and so when you start to look at that, you end up sort of thinking, well, there's a story that happened beforehand, and there's a story that's going to happen after. What we've got is just a brief moment in time. It's a snapshot. And if you look at Nighthawks in the Diner by God, I can't remember his name. Do you know the picture I'm talking about?
I don't, but I know the bowl. Yeah, everybody's seen that bowl. And I'll be honest with you, I'm the one looking very closely at that painting and looking for the worms. Because I always wonder, this is how my brain works. How long did it take to paint that? How many times did they have to swap out those apples? Come on. I just want to know, you know, did they go bad? Did they go rotten? What happened?
All right. Oh well, Nighthawks in the I remember who it was. It was I should have realised actually because his name is Hopper, who's
Oh,
one of
okay.
the main characters in the book. Um, in fact, the book is littered with Easter eggs because the names of people are all giveaways of things that I like and references to other things as well, references to a lot of pop culture. But if you take something like Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, it's a bunch of people in an American diner at night, really, and it's a very famous painting. But whenever I look at it, I sort of think, there's what happened to get those people there. Why are they all there at that time of night? What are their own personal stories? It's an unusual painting in the way that it's devoid of anyone apart from those characters, and it's actually been used as a setup for lots and lots of different films, where films have copied exactly that kind of look, but then you see the moment that's been captured in the picture, and then you sort of think, well, what's going to happen? What's the outcome? So I think when you start to if you're a lover of sort of paintings that capture a scene, or something that's more fantastical than, like I said, a sort of an illustrative sort of picture of a bowl of fruit or some sunflowers or whatever, you gravitate towards filling in the rest of the gaps. You become almost a naturalized storyteller. So I think it's always been there. That's a really long-winded way of answering that, but
No, but it makes sense to me. I mean, there's a lot of art I'll look at and I just don't get it. And if it has to be explained to me, I really don't get it. But there's others, maybe simple, maybe more elaborate, prints, paintings, drawings, and I'll be entranced because I want to know what happened before, what happened later. Did the did the fruit rot? I mean, that's
yeah,
just kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
It's like
I
how
mean,
long? take for that, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, I think art is really intriguing actually because they always say that there's three points of views when you look at a, a piece of work, and you don't have to understand it because that's sort of almost the irrelevant part. Like my dad was always like that. Like my background is a very sort of working class northern background, north of England. And I went to art college, and my brother ended up studying medicine, which was quite unusual for the sort of background that we were from. But my parents were sort of very very supportive. But my dad was always like, I don't understand art, I don't get it. And I used to say, look, there are three perspectives. There's the point of view from the artist in terms of what he thought. There's the point of view of the viewer in terms of what they think, and then there's almost the sort of the kind of the critical analysis or the critic's point of view. And it doesn't necessarily mean to say that all three of them marry up. I mean, I studied sort of history of art as well, and it's when Gauguin and even the sort of the surrealists and Dadaists, they're often the meaning was sort of lost because for them, their work was, I think there's a phrase and it's called when somebody was asked, I think it was either Buñuel or Dali, I can't remember which, who was asked to explain the meaning of surrealism, and they said, "Oh, it's an unlikely meeting between an umbrella and an ironing board at the bottom of a swimming pool." And I really love that because I think
See,
it's
that makes sense. It really does.
it
Because
really
I've
it
looked
really
at some of those pictures and said, huh. But then I would go back and go, huh, all over again. But because I saw something different.
Well, it is, and it's a really good way of describing lots of art, not just sort of pictorial art in terms of narrative art or books as well, because I think, good art or good stories, and in fact, good forms of entertainment, because including comedy, is about the juxtaposition of things that don't necessarily comfortably sit together side by side, and the story comes from the friction that is created by that juxtaposition.
And that makes sense. And I'm glad you brought in books because I was just going to say that a lot of what you were just speaking about could be about books, about the writing process, about the reading process.
Mm.
Like I've got hundreds of books in my office. Yours is one of them. And all of them, hundreds, were gifted to me by my podcast guests. And they stay in here. There's no other books in here. I have thousands of books, but these books were gifted to me. And I often look at the spine or I'll pick up a book. I've got many that I will read over and over and over again. But you know what they say about when the student is ready, the teacher appears? I'll pick up a book. I've read it multiple times, flip it open and say, oh, there it is. It's
Mm.
there when you need it. It's there when you're looking for it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's tons of stuff that you pick up from books. I mean, I'm quite a reader actually. I do like to read a lot. I've always got a book on the go. Um, and I sort of my range is stuff from Stephen King, popular sort of Stephen King novels. I'm a big Stephen King fan. I think he's just so good. He's such a genius, that man. But to stuff that's sort of a little bit more obscure, and to Ian McEwan or Ian Banks, or it's there's all sorts of different kind of books. So Justin Cronin as well, the Passage trilogy, which was pretty spectacular. So, but there's always something to get from them, even though these are books sort of steeped in fantasy. There are still some hardcore facts that you start to learn, and you learn about yourself as well, I think.
You do. When we were in our virtual green room a bit ago, you were describing your book and you talk, it's paranormal horror. And I went, I read a lot of paranormal fiction. Horror, I can't. I just go, ah, and I have to go sit down for a while. But paranormal, I'm in. So go figure. I don't know what the disconnect there is for me. I think I don't want to be scared and have nightmares, but they are different genres, but they do weave together very well in your book, I believe.
Yeah, well, my book is spooky. I think, as I said to you, it's not for everyone. I mean, I think if you're turned off by sort of blood, guts, and gore, and violence, and cannibalism, and things like that, and don't read it.
Scared. It gives me nightmares.
If you've read it and you weren't prepared for that, I can only apologize. But it's very contextual. I mean, I don't like. I'm not a fan of gore books. I don't like that sort of horror porn kind of thing. I think it has to be part of the story. It has to make sense, and it has to bring something to it. And so, whilst there are some scenes in it which are a bit disturbing, they do paint a picture, and they're there for a very good reason. And I think it's the same with the characters. Like all the characters have a kind of backstory, and it's not a long meandering book where the backstories end up just feeling as though it's padding. They give a reason as to why people are behaving the way they do, because no one is good, no one is bad. All the characters are sort of shades of good and bad, apart from one who's quite bad. He really is the sort of psycho of a story.
Well, Kevin, how did I mean, you have a company. You had a company at the time, you still have it.
Mhm.
What about COVID-19, the pandemic and the lockdown? What had you saying, I'm going to write a book?
Well, the story behind it is, I mean, it's quite interesting actually, because I've got to go back a few years actually to sort of explain that, because it just didn't sort of pop out of my mind and think, I know, it's the pandemic, I'll write a book. It's a little bit more involved in that, because I think no one really knows where ideas come from, and I think sometimes that gestation period can take a long, long time until you get to that point where you really feel compelled to write it. But it was a story I wrote years and years ago. So quite a long time ago, I went traveling. There was a recession in England. A lot of designers had lost their jobs, including myself, and there was not much to do. So I thought, I'll go traveling. I'll see where I can go on my limited budget. So that's what I did, and I ended up on a kibbutz for about 3 months, and I went around Egypt for a month, and then came back to the UK. And traveling is a bit of a sort of detox period, because you don't have those sort of commitments, and it's a strange thing to do. I recommend to anyone to go traveling, because you are deliberately detaching yourself from the world. So it gives you a very unusual perspective away from your sort of commitments that tend to burden us. And I remember sitting on the top of a double-decker bus in London, just going to a friend's place to sort of couch surf. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to design, and thinking, what do I want to do? And it was, I don't know if you remember, there's a really old film called Throw Mama from a Train with Danny DeVito and one of the lines in it is Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal. Anyway, one of the lines is, somebody says, what does a writer do? And they say, a writer writes. And like I said, I've always been interested in telling stories, and I always thought, because I'm slightly dyslexic as well, so I've always been sort of not necessarily confident in terms of putting pen to paper, because I thought, well, when sometimes I look at what I've written, it's all over the place. So it takes a while to sort of reconstruct it back into something that makes sense. So I thought I'll write scripts, because people don't speak in a grammatical way. It'll be easier. So that's kind of what I did. So I did a bit of freelance work here and there to get some money, but I spent most of my time writing spec scripts, none of which went anywhere apart from Id. And I remember writing the story of Id, thinking, this is a pretty good story. And at the time, my flatmate, one of my flatmates, his sister was working with Peter Greenaway, and I got my mate to read it, and he said he was the same as me. He was an actor, and he said, I think you've written something that's pretty interesting. He said, I'm going to send it to my sister and see what she thought, what she thinks. So he sent it to her, and she got back to me and said, I think this is actually this is a unique story. And there's lots of stories that are it's the same story, but are just a retelling of it. So she sent it to someone else. It was a long line of people, and we eventually got it to one of the people who was one of the original producers of, I think, Sophie's Choice, who's now retired. She's anyway. We got a deal for Fox Television to make it as a TV movie, and the producer I was working with at the time said, "I'll turn it down. We've only just put it out." And he said, "Turn it down and let's go for a theatrical release." So I did, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking, "What have I done?"
Yeah.
So
I was listening to you thinking, I wonder how it actually made it where it was supposed to go without being stolen or
oh
lost.
yeah, well, you've got to be trusting. I mean, I was pretty naive at
Yeah.
the time, but anyway, I phoned him up and said, "Look, let's not turn it down. That's a dumb move." And he said, "No, it's too late." I said, "We'll retract it." And he said, "No, it doesn't work that way." Anyway, we didn't get a second bite of a cherry, so to speak. So it sort of sat in a drawer for a while. And the trick is things like that, you have to move on, So I just carried on working. I met my wife, we got married, we got kids. I was just building my own life, and I was still tinkering around with stuff, and I still tinkered around with it every now and then. It was like, just something I just couldn't leave alone. And I sent it out to other places, and I would every now and then I'd get a little bit of interest in it, but not enough for someone to say, "Yep, let's go with this." And at one point, it sort of, it languished in kind of development hell for a couple of years, and nothing came of it. And then when the pandemic hit, uh, that wiped away my entire sort of work. So no one was spending any money on marketing and design. So because companies were hurting and they were contracting and pulling in their budgets, so I had literally nothing to do. I remember it really vividly. Actually, there was one day I was dropping my son off to at the train station. They were all going on a school trip, and I met a friend of mine who was working in entertainment, and I was saying to him, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I think we'll be okay. How are you doing?" I said, "Well, things are starting to, I'm getting calls of people cancelling stuff." And then at the end of that day, I saw the same guy and I said, "How are you going?" He said, "I've lost everything." "How are you going?" I said, "Well, exactly the same. I have no work, so I'm not quite sure what we're going to do." But fortunately for us in Australia, we had the JobKeeper scheme. So the government, so we put our mortgage on hold, uh, and we sort of claimed JobKeeper, which was like a benefit thing. So for people in Australia, it was it was a really cushioned time, um, and in Queensland, it was a very surreal moment in time, very weird. And so I had nothing to do. It was my wife who suggested, saying, "Well, why don't you write it as a book? You've always tinkered around with it." So I thought, you know what? I'm never going to get this chance again. And I'd already started writing it as a book, but I never really had that glut of time to sit down and commit to it for a long period of time. And I think you do kind of need to do that because you lose track of your characters, you lose track of a story. And I thought, right, so for 6 months, and I already had the story. So I just sat and wrote. So it was like a day job. I'd get up and, start work at 9, finish at 5, and I was just writing. And I loved it. It was brilliant. I think you'll never get a time like that again. So for me, I used that sort of lockdown as um, I wasn't the only one either. I think there's a lot of stuff a lot of interesting things came out of that period. lot of terrible things, obviously. But I think you have to use your time wisely, and I think you have to try and look at the world in a more positive light. So anyway, I wrote it, and then it came the time to start getting it out there and trying to find a publisher. So I was met with the usual tsunami of rejection letters
It
until
always breaks my heart when I hear, and I know a lot of authors, and they'll tell me the stories about how many, and the stacks of them. I'm like, oh, it just hurts my heart. But I wanted to ask you very quick, and I think you started to go down the road I wanted to go down. When did you actually begin putting pen to paper, not in its earliest form, but what was its earliest form? When did you start changing it from whatever form it was in to a book? It was during the COVID days?
no, well, no, it would have been pre-COVID
Okay.
that I'd started writing, but I was just really kind of playing around with it. I'm not a big TV watcher, so
Me either.
and with if you've got little kids, your social life is sort of generated around them. Uh, so it's just on evenings that I would start to write it. So it was probably, God, you lose track of time. I mean, it was published in 22, but it was probably, I don't know, 2019, 2018, I guess, when I started really starting to write it as a book. So it took a while. I mean, it went through lots and lots of drafts. I mean, I think the final draft was about draft 13.
That's not bad, actually, from what I understand. So, what was it before you thought, oh, this can be a book? Was it just scripts? Was it note paper? What was it?
Oh no, it was a screenplay. Uh,
Oh, okay, I missed that part.
yeah. No, that was the so we were offered a deal by Fox Television to do it as a TV movie. Uh,
Right. Realized it was a screenplay though. Okay, I missed that. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's right. Uh, and yeah, so like I said, I already had the story, and I think this since working in design and working also as a copywriter, I felt a little bit more confident in terms of how to turn a phrase. And like I think a lot of people sort of see writing as one of these areas where it's for the academics of us, it's for the people who are very, very smart. And you think actually it's not, it's really for the storytellers.
Exactly. I was just going to jump in and say, no, it's for people who can weave a good story, keep your attention, and teach you something while they're doing it.
Well, that's right. But it's our own insecurities that prevent us from doing that. And I think we all have that niggly little voice that sits in the back of our mind telling us that we're not good enough or we can't do it, or it's other people that do that, not people like you. And it's the trick is just to just ignore it and get on with it.
Exactly. So once, and I interrupted because I told you this earlier, I've got questions.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you got the book and you felt like it was ready to go somewhere, how did that turn out? I mean, obviously the book is out there, and if I'm not mistaken, and I may be thinking of something else entirely, but aren't you working with Ken Atchity,
But yeah, that's right.
a
Yeah,
story merchant? Yeah,
yes.
Ken is one of my very favorite people in the world. He knows it too. I'm always telling him, I've got two, I've got three favorite people in the world, and he's in the top three. And that line shifts in the sand every day, but he's in the top three.
All right. Well, it's how I met with Ken actually is kind of quite interesting actually because I just sent it out. I mean, I had a book, um, and it's literally an index of agents around the world, and you can look it up. I mean, if anyone out there is interested in writing, writing is the it's kind of the easy part. The hard part is actually trying to get your manuscript in front of agents and people who can actually help you do something with it. Uh, so I literally just went through all sorts of different agents, and you can't you can't really submit direct to a publisher. But Ken was listed in the book, and his background in film I found particularly interesting, and that was an area I wanted to go in because it was originally written as a film. So, and Story Merchant have a very kind of interesting way of dealing with things. I think they see books almost as proof of concept to then repackage and sort of see if they can actually get a more of a deal with a film or TV studio or a
Right. Same with Meg and Meg 2. I haven't seen those movies, but I mean, who doesn't know about Meg and Meg 2?
Oh, they're fab. They really are. So, in fact, I watched Meg 2 last night. It was on Foxtel. So there
Oh,
you go.
I'll
And
have to
they
go
are,
find one of them.
oh, they're hugely entertaining. I mean, don't expect anything sort of cerebrally challenging, but they are they're great. I think they're a lot of fun. They're absolutely bonkers, and yeah, hugely entertaining. I thought they were fantastic. It was like Jaws on steroids. They're brilliant films, actually.
I have watched Jaws and it scared me stupid. So that's
Well,
just,
who didn't it scare? I watched it when I was a kid and was terrified to go into the water.
oh yeah, we were talking, you and I were talking earlier about Frankenstein and some of the scary books, and young Frankenstein I can do.
Yeah.
The real Frankenstein story? No. I'm a coward.
Oh well, with Ken, I mean, I just sent out as uh, a an inquiry letter, a query letter to Ken, and along with other people, and Ken got back to me and said, "All right, just tell me a little bit more." So we just started up a dialogue, and interesting enough, well, as we were talking, he had a very different brand and a very different website on his for the look of Story Merchant. And as we were talking, we started talking about his brand as well. And I said, look, your 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 brand is in good shape because your brand is basically, you, uh, and you're passionate about writing and about books and about content and film and production. And he's a really interesting guy in terms of how he managed to sort of pivot what he was doing in his life at sort of quite a late age. So he's quite inspiring.
Yeah, he
I've
was a professor at Harvard, I believe. I can't remember, but I
Yeah,
remember
that's
he
right.
was
Yeah,
associated with.
yeah, he had tenure. He had
Wow. Yeah.
he was doing really well, and he just thought, you know what, nah, it's not for me.
Quit. Yeah.
I'll go and do something much more stable, like film production, like producing films. So yeah,
Exactly.
he had tenure. He had a very stable job, and he just gave it all up. But
Well,
anyway,
that's faith. He had faith that he could do it. I asked him one time, did you ever just kind of wonder what the heck you were doing? He said, no, I had faith. I knew what I needed to do. I knew what I wanted to do. It never occurred to me it wouldn't work.
well, that's right. I think I'm a big believer. So you end up where you're supposed to be, and I'm not so much as where I'm kind of one of these fatalistic people thinking, oh, I believe in fate, and because I think that's an abdication of responsibility. But I do think you know you are where you're supposed to be in terms of the decisions you make, and there's no looking back. You just got to keep going and think, yeah, if you want to do it, do it. Don't let things hold you back. And it was the conversation I had with Ken were interesting because we sort of came to an arrangement. I actually ended up doing Ken's corporate identity. I redid his website and his brand as well. So if you look at his website, that's my work.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I'm a web developer too, so I'm always, trying to find what's going on his website. Where can I, send information to people? Because I have several people say, Denise, do you know anybody I can get my book to? I would suggest you start with Ken Atchity. Go there.
Yeah, yeah. He's yeah, he's good. He's cool. I mean, the whole team. So I'm working with and another guy at the moment with the story merchants called
Sam?
no Toby Roberts.
Oh, okay.
I know Sam as well. Um, so in fact, I've done work with Sam on her a pitch document she was putting together for a film. Um, but yeah, Toby's sort of taking a sort of pitch document out to different production companies and studios. I think we've got it in with Netflix at the moment, so hopefully.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you, where are you guys going with this? What's in the pipeline?
Well, hopefully to I think as technology has moved on, and I think the way we consume our entertainment has changed. I think in the past it used to be, a theatrical release was the sort of the pinnacle, I guess, wanting to get your book or wanting to get your script made into a movie. But now it's really different. I think streaming services or streaming platforms give people the opportunity to watch all sorts of different content that you wouldn't normally see. And whilst I said before I'm not a big TV viewer, I'm really not. But I do like because I don't watch free to air stuff. But some of the stuff that you get on Stan, Disney Plus, or whatever, it's pretty amazing. And I think there's a real almost kind of renaissance period happening, or a revival for people making lots of content. Uh, and as these platforms kind of exist, there's and more and more come online. There's it means there's more and more opportunity. And I think now we've sort of restructured it so it would actually fit a long form series. So it's broken down as an 8-part series, and I think it would do it more justice because you have to get to know the characters. I think with a 2-hour film, you have a very limited amount of time to get to know somebody. So I think people who make really well crafted films, like the Banshees of Inisherin or the Triangle of Sadness or even Poor Things, I think they're amazing to be able to sort of create an understanding of a character in such a short period of time.
Well, the last movie I don't give me books. I've got books everywhere. My favorite way to absorb knowledge is to read. Always have been. I was reading at 3. But when I do watch something, if it doesn't grab my attention pretty quickly, I'm out. I'll
Oh
go to the
yeah.
start making a gumbo. I'm not going to stick around and sit with my fanny. I'm just not. But the last movie theater that, I walked into deliberately was Top Gun Maverick.
Oh wow, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, not, and I never did see the first one. In fact, I had people over here and we were talking about Top Gun Maverick because that was the release weekend. And I
Oh,
said,
that's
well,
right. Yeah,
I've never
that's
seen, yeah, the first one, I had never seen it. So we rented it on Amazon and watched that one. And then, we went the next day to the movie theater. I am still blown away by that movie. But the, I mean, yes, it's visually exciting, but you do get a chance to get to know the characters, which I thought was important.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like, but I just watched Poor Things recently, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I was so impressed with it. It's such a good film. It's funny. It's very funny. It's almost like a comedic telling of a Frankenstein story. But I think the real genius is how they've managed to sort of create and develop these well-rounded characters that you kind of get a feeling as to who they are because of I mean not just the way it's written, it's also the performances as well. But I think that's extremely clever. I mean, where the economy of words count because you've got such a limited amount of time. Whereas, I think for somebody like me, I'm more comfortable writing a book. I think when I tried doing it as a screenplay, it was You always end up thinking, uh, I'm cutting out the wrong stuff. You know, it's too long a story to condense into a 90-minute thing. Whereas now, with the popularity of streaming platforms and the availability of places to put content, it makes more sense that it would be a sort of longer, sort of like an 8-part or a 6-part series. But we'll see. We'll see. You know.
Well, and keep me posted. And I'll ask Ken to keep me posted too. I'm dying to see how this works out. But without everything we're talking about here with films and even music,
Mm.
starts with the writing. It starts with the idea. It starts with the story, but it has to be written.
Well,
So without writers, none of this happens.
well, absolutely, and I think it's interesting. I think you've touched on a really sort of poignant sort of point, actually, because I think writers are often kind of quite casually discarded in different industries, because once they get the content, it's like, right, you can go away now because you're a little bit irritating. We want to take it over, and I think, you know, hence the strike in America.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. That kind of went belly up for a while, didn't it?
It certainly did, and I think also with AI as well. I mean, Ashton Kutcher was giving an interview recently, and he was talking about how great AI is for content making, and you know, it's going to be great. And you just think, for who and why? Because you know, I'm not anti-technology. I think technology is great, but I think things like AI are really concerning, because yes, AI can write, and you can sort of just be, you know, give it the right prompts, but like, how, you know, where's the fun in that? I mean, that's just such a cold thing, and you're destroying an industry that employs thousands, if not potentially hundreds of thousands around the globe, who are going to be sort of jobless by being able to do that. You know, it just, anyway. So it seems a bit of a strange thing. I have a bit of a rant about AI, because I think you know, it's touching so many industries in such a negative way.
It is. I'm not going to argue with you, and I'm known as a techie nerd in stilettos. I like technology,
Mm.
but and I use AI. I use chat. Sometimes I prefer Perplexity, but I'm going to tell you straight up, I use it to clean up something that has already come from my heart, my gut, my soul. I'll take whatever ramblings that I wrote down and say, can you tidy this up? Does a terrific job, but none of it is something that they made up. They're just tidying it for me. They're my editor, so to
Well,
speak.
that's right, and because essentially it's an aggregation tool, so it's pulling
Yeah, yeah.
information from different parts of the world, and the largest sort of repository of information and things like that is often sort of Facebook. So you think, well, that's, you know, that's a toilet. You know, it's the,
Yeah.
no,
I know.
you're not getting good stuff on that. So what is it writing? So you're
I know.
getting the lowest common denominator here. You think, well, that's appalling. So you know, and I think I was talking to a colleague recently, and they were extolling the virtues of AI, saying how brilliant it is. And I was thinking, if you can justify how brilliant it is to me after this particular argument. So my argument is, right, so with a company, the biggest overhead is staff, right? So
Mhm.
all companies and all businesses look to maximize their profit margins. And the best way to maximize your profit margin is to get rid of the people, because that's the largest overhead. If you get rid of the people and you can automate your process, you'll make more money. So AI allows you to do that. So it will make your business more profitable, more streamlined, etc. But all those people, not only are they out of a job, but they're also their jobs are now redundant, because you've proven that they are unnecessary. So those people are now unemployable, because they don't need to be employed. You can actually do their job for a fraction of the cost. So you're getting this tiny minority of people who are business owners who are going to make a lot of money. and the rest of the world is going to be living in abject poverty. And it sort of, in terms of, there is a bit of a cavernous gap between the haves and have-nots. That's sort of an obvious thing, but it's going to get bigger because of AI. Like, it's not helping at all. And I think when technologists turn around and say, "Oh, it's you're anti-technology, or you need to embrace it," and you think, no, you need to look at the repercussions of your invention. It's not enough just to sort of go, "Woo, look at what we've done." It's irresponsible. And in terms of it's the social benefits, you're an idiot, because it has none. And there are some, you sort of think, like operations, for example, surgeons are fallible, where you can actually program an AI surgeon to actually run a more sort of hardware computer to actually perform an operation, and 9 times out of 10 it'll be perfect. But I don't know. I think it's we're not heading in a great place with it, actually.
Well, as much as I love technology, I'm concerned about it. And my reservations, low-level fear, worry, I don't know what you want to call it, COVID. So many people, going back to what you just said, so many people lost their jobs, particularly in the restaurant industries. They were done. They would be open one day and closed the next. And, here's these people who have really not trained for the most part for anything other than maybe cooking or waiting on tables, and they're just going, now what? So
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
had to find a way to feed their children. And it's getting the same thing right now. Restaurants now we're in, I don't know about y'all in Australia, but now, I mean, you go anywhere and they'll give you the little card reader, and you look at it and you go to sign it. It says, "Do you want to leave a tip?" No. I ordered on the phone. I drove over here to pick it up, and you're handing it to me. I'm not giving you a tip. So it's just, that's my rant for the day. But the restaurant industries, I think, are just having a horrible time, and they're trying to any way they can to get into your pocketbook, and people are mad.
It
And they
is.
should.
Yeah. No, I agree, Dennis. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, keep going.
No, I agree, Denise. I mean, I think hospitality is, and you feel it, but I see the sort of both sides to it, because as a student, I worked in hospitality. I worked as a waiter, and I worked as a barman, and I think I was fine because it was a student job. I always knew that I was going to do something else. But the people who depend on these jobs to make a living, it's minimum wage.
Not in California. Right. I think it's $20 or 25 an hour. It's ridiculous. There
Oh,
are people saying that, to go to McDonald's is a night out now.
yeah,
That's what we used to pay to go to a decent restaurant.
yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Hmm.
That is crazy, because you really do sort of think, like, when is it going to get back to normal? And
I
this
think it
this
is.
is the normal. Yeah, this is the new
This
normal.
is, yeah, it is. Well, we're gonna get mad and start stomping our
Oh
feet.
yeah, we did move on from that.
Well, but these are things that are important because, like we're talking, if somebody is not writing these things, whether it's through AI, they're writing books, they're writing music, they're writing pamphlets, we're all writing. Writers, I think, should be looked at with a lot of respect.
Oh
I
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Well, yeah, of course you do.
I couldn't agree more, Denise. I think right, it should be paid more as well.
Sounded like I was sucking up. I wasn't. I was dead serious. Sorry about that. But
But you know what?
go
But
ahead. I'm sorry.
so I was just going to say, when you said, "Oh, it all comes from writing," but I think it all comes from, even you have to take a step back. Is it comes from an ability to believe in your imagination, and a recognition that what you want to say is worthwhile, and the confidence to do it, because it's often said, we all have a story inside us, and for some people, that's probably where it should stay. But for a lot of other people, you tend to think, no, if you want to do it, don't be frightened to do it. Do it. I mean, I've read some awful books that you think, how on earth did that get published? But it all stems from a good idea, and I think if you've got a good idea, just pursue it, and you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy the journey, and it's about don't think of the end destination. Just get on that train and see how long you can keep it going for.
Exactly. And I do believe we all have a book in us. We really do. I'm a lucid dreamer, which if anybody has not done that, it's an interesting way to try to sleep. I don't sleep much anyway, but I am a lucid dreamer, and it's every night. It's not just once in a while, it's every night. I can wake up absolutely exhausted because I was traveling somewhere. But
Wow.
I've written entire books in my sleep, and I'd wake up and go, oh, I can't rewrite that. It's 300 pages. And then off I go. But
I,
it was good. It was a bestseller, but I wrote it somewhere else on another plane, maybe. Who knows?
I do. I have a notepad I carry around with me everywhere. It's just sort of small A5 size. It's a little bit thick, but I can shove it in a pocket. And I have it by the side of my bed as well. And occasionally, not every night, but occasionally I'll wake up and you do have these really crazy thoughts first thing in the morning where you just, it's you're in that kind of really strange state where your subconscious is very connected to your conscious state, and you're
No,
not.
for me, it's 3:18. I wake up every morning at 3:18 and I have to write something down without fail.
3:18. Wow, do you want to hear something spooky
Yeah.
about that? The in I forget which mythology, but in mythology, the devil's time is three. I think it's 3:18.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, it's funny because you just said that, and I thought, wow, I remember coming across that, and it's because people sort of talk about, when in mythology when the devil's
Right.
around and things like that, but it's either 3:18 or 3:20,
It was
but
me, 3:18.
it's 3:18.
Yeah. Now I have to go look it up. My
I
mom
find
used to say when I would wake up for the final time, which is generally around 4:30 in the morning, that my feet would hit the floor and the devil would say, "Oh crap, she's awake." It's it's
Brilliant.
still the same. But what I do, in there's a reason, I guess, why it's 3:18, but when I don't sleep well, I just never have. But when I think I'm going to finally actually drift off into sleep, I will literally look up at my ceiling fan because I'm talking to God at that point and I'm saying something out loud. And I'm saying, thank you. And I'm expressing my gratitude, talking about how my day went, because that's important. What good things did you get done? And I will ask my ceiling fan or God or aliens or whoever it is that's listening to me to give me an answer to something that had perplexed me, something that I just couldn't wrap my head around. 3:18, it shows up, and I call it a God wink.
Right. It's interesting because subconsciously, like I used to work. I mean, I've worked in psychology think tanks before. So in terms of my career, it's not just straight graphic design. It's also working in sort of behavioral science companies, as well as sort of psychology think tanks, where it's all about how do we change people's behavior, how do we get people to do what they want to do. And we used to work for things like Australian Sport Institute or whatever, a lot of big corporates. But part of that thing and that connection between your subconscious and conscious brain is often if you're struggling to come up with an answer, and I do it myself, where if I'm struggling to sort of think of like what happens next for a particular plot point, for a story point, sitting down at the computer just endlessly bashing away at the keys is not going to help you solve that problem.
Nope.
'Cause, you know,
Get out of there. Go outside. Go stand under a tree. Walk the dog. Get
yeah,
out of there.
yeah, and like I get my best ideas at the gym. I sort of work out, and I'm that annoying person with a little pad who writes stuff down as well. Um, but I find it if you distract your sort of conscious self, it allows your subconscious to do the hard work, and you should be confident to know that the subconscious is actually getting it done. And sometimes it may take the subconscious a little bit longer, and you can go to bed, you can go to sleep, but the next day, it may be 2 days, but you will get an answer. You just have to trust yourself that that answer will pop in your head at some point because it's busy sort of gestating and your subconscious is percolating away and it will provide that answer. I am
Wow.
absolutely totally committed to that idea because
I do too.
it happens to me all the time where if I'm struggling for a plot point, I'll um, I'll go and do something else. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I tend to sort of think, oh, I'm really knackered. I could do with a bit of a nap. And I either, I don't. I tend to go for a walk or I tend to have a workout. Uh, but it revitalizes you, and then later on you sort of think, oh, actually, my character should be doing this instead of that.
Right. Right. You allowed time to turn it over to your subconscious for review.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Kevin, we are running out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation. Did you mention in the virtual green room that you're cooking up ideas for a second book?
Yep, I'm on with the first draft at the moment. So I'm about halfway through, and it's like I have a tendency. I've tried to sort of plot a story out in steps, but I can't really do that. So I just tend to go along with the journey of the characters and see where they go. Um, so I have the ending in mind, but it's an interesting process. So yeah, we're on that journey at the moment.
What's it
But
going to be about?
it's it's another sort of psychological thriller, I suppose, but it's a little bit spooky, this one, but it's also set against the backdrop of real estate. Um, and I think there's something really fascinating about real estate because a building is just a building until somebody moves in and it becomes a home, and it changes the fabric of that home. And we don't really know why, but I think homes feel different when you go into an empty building that no one's ever lived in. It feels completely different to going into an empty home that somebody has lived in, and whether or not it's the skin we shed ground into the fabric of that building and it shares our DNA somehow and we become more connected, physically connected to it. I don't know, but there's something sort of quite intangible about it, and I think that's quite interesting about it. So, and it's also I don't really want to tell you the story, but
I want the book though when it's ready.
it's yeah, it's cool. I'm enjoying it actually. Yeah, it's cool, and because I work for myself, I'm able to sort of I devote large chunks of time to it, so I can actually get it done in between working as a brand consultant.
And you do have another job. Tell us very quickly before I let you go about your company, what you do there.
Onion Creative, well, it's Onion Creative is essentially just me. Although I work with developers, animators, filmmakers, programmers, all sorts of different people. But so I always say we because it's never really just me. Um, but we're sort of brand consultants, I guess, or brand strategists, and that really is about finding or being able to articulate the personality of a company or organization, and how we then communicate that to the market, to an audience in an appropriate way that makes sense. So and again, that's also really about problem solving because just advertising something saying, "Yeah, look at us, we're awesome, buy us," people are just kind of like, no, you have to explain what the problem is that you're solving. And it may be a problem that the market doesn't know they have, but you have to branding is more about sort of deconstructing a company and reconstructing it in a way that is makes sense to a marketplace. So
In
it's a cool
front of,
job. It's a
oh,
cool
I'm
job.
sorry.
You what? Sorry.
I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry. It's also important, I think, these days in particular for people, companies, to get in front of why you want to work with them or buy their product. Don't just say, "Oh, we do this. This is really great." Woo-hoo. You need to make sure that you have the pulse of the audience or the client or the consumer. What is it they really want? I think
Well,
too many businesses forget about it's not about you. It's
well,
about what's in it for them.
that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And I think when we start to look at brand development for companies, it's like I said, it's all about problem solving. It's how you solve that problem and what is it that you're doing, or what is it that you have that somebody would want. What's the reason behind it? And I think advertising has become so sophisticated now that from a market point of view, from a consumer point of view, we have such a good filter that we're able to, lots of advertising, standard advertising just becomes wallpaper. It becomes invisible to us because we're bombarded with it. And it's not about sort of turning up the volume either, because the louder you shout, the less you're heard. I think you have to present something that solves a problem, that in a way, and it may, like I said, it may be a problem that the market doesn't know they have, but it's about sort of something a lot more than, buy this because we've got a special, or, it's a price point difference. Branding is much more about sort of creating something that's more, has a more tribal feel as well. So it's where you add value to not to a company, but to a consumer's life, I guess.
Exactly. Kevin, I genuinely appreciate your company today. I know we had to do this at a time that would work for you. I'm in Southwest Louisiana, so it's about 5 o'clock in the evening here, and I think it's early morning for you. So I really appreciate you working with me to make this happen. So tell people very quickly where they can find you. Well, let me back up a bit. Do you have any last thoughts to share with the audience, and how can they connect with you on the web? And how can they find your book?
Well, I suppose last thoughts would be if you want to write, you should do it. I think it's. I, I think that there are so many opportunities for people to follow and pursue their creative kind of dreams. I think it's there are certainly so many platforms that enable you to do that now. It's don't ever listen to that negative voice in your head. It can get very loud at times, but people can connect with me on you can connect with me on Facebook under Kevin Spark Author. I'm not very active on Facebook, I must admit. I don't write a lot. I'm not big on that. I suppose I should be, but I don't know. I've got other things to do, I suppose. But if you send me a message, I will always get back to anyone who writes to me. You can go to my website, which is kevspark.com. And again, if you can drop me a line on that, and I'll get back to you as well. You can get the book on Amazon. Just do a search either for my name or id a novel. I think you have to write in id a novel. You can't just write in id, because what it'll come up with is loads of stuff for ID, and it'll be how to prove your ID and all sorts of stuff like that. So id a novel by Kevin Spark, and you'll find it. But if you do download it, or if you do buy it, and you like it, please leave a review. That's it's always good to see that people like it. And if you want to get in touch, get in touch. More than happy to have a sort of a digital conversation with whoever.
Thank you. And I downloaded the Kindle book this morning. I have the physical book because it was sent to me by your publicist. But I thought, well, let me go look at it because I'm one of those people. I want to read the physical book. I want to read it on Kindle. If there's an Audible, I want to hear that too. I want to absorb it any way I can. So this morning, and I don't know if this is a permanent thing, but if you are a Kindle Unlimited member, you can download it for free and read it over the weekend.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of Kindle. I think it's great. I mean, I like them both. The book I'm reading at the moment is a physical book, but yeah, I've got tons of tons of books in my Kindle library, and I think if I had them physically, our house would be awash with books.
I've got books in the garage. I've got them in my bedroom. They're everywhere. And this is how pathetic I am. I have 2 Kindle Pros. I run the battery down on one, I go charge it, and I pick up the other one and pick up where I left off. So I have a
Awesome.
plan. So,
Oh,
anyway,
great.
well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today, and stay in touch and let me know when your next book will be ready, and we'll be sure to get you back.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you, Denise. It's been an absolute pleasure and a joy, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. So, thanks again. It's been great.
My pleasure. Well, listen to the audience as we conclude today's episode. Your feedback means an awful lot to me, and I'll tell you why. If you found the show helpful, please support us with a quick review on iTunes because your input is vital in my mission to inspire and empower more individuals. So don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a review, and share your Partner in Success Radio with friends and colleagues. And be sure to find Kevin Spark on the web and connect with him and go read his book. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Kevin, again, thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Denise.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffiths at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.